According to the laws of supply and demand, an equilibrium will eventually be reached where suppliers will meet the demands of consumers at a given price and quantity level. In the case of this podcast, the supply and demand for questions are met at an equilibrium point of exactly one episode per month. Stay tuned for Volume 6 of Questions and Answers on this episode of Everything Everywhere Daily. This episode is sponsored by ButcherBox. I can't tell you how much I love ButcherBox. I actually get excited when my ButcherBox shipment arrives because it's like an adult version of Christmas morning. Just before recording this, I had a New York strip steak from ButcherBox, which I made in a cast iron pan, which I have become a big fan of, and it was delicious. Everything that ButcherBox procures is of the highest quality for meat and seafood. 100% grass-fed beef, free-range chickens, crate-free pork, and wild-caught seafood. And the quality of the product really does come through in the taste, which is why I buy it. Right now, you will get free chicken thighs for a year and $20 off when you sign up for ButcherBox. Just go to butcherbox.com/daily and use promo code DAILY. Once again, get free chicken thighs for a year and $20 off your first box when you sign up today at butcherbox.com/daily using code DAILY. This episode is sponsored by Inside Tracker. Everyone's body is different, and if you want to have an optimal plan for health and longevity, you need to know what is going on inside your body. Created by experts from Harvard, Tufts, and MIT, Inside Tracker uses the power of your body's biomarker data to reveal what you need to live healthier, longer. You'll receive specific nutrition, exercise, supplement, and lifestyle recommendations, providing insight that goes well beyond what you can get from generic blood work. And since May is Women's Health Month, Inside Tracker is unveiling an upgraded unlimited plan that includes 3 new hormone markers that are critical to measure during a woman's reproductive and menopausal years. And because it is Women's Health Month, Inside Tracker is not charging for those 3 hormone markers in May. For a limited time, Everything Everywhere Daily listeners can get 20% off of Inside Tracker's new Ultimate Plan, complete with estradiol, progesterone, and TSH. With Inside Tracker, discovering what your body needs is no longer a guessing game. Visit insidetracker.com/EED. That's insidetracker.com/EED. It's time once again to do my monthly dive into your questions so that I may provide you with answers. If you would like to submit a question, just join the Facebook group and leave your questions when I post the monthly Q&A thread at the beginning of every month. With that, the first question comes from Lenny Zurif. He asks, how long does it take to produce one episode, to include all the research you have to do? Well, Lenny, the amount of time it takes is totally dependent on the type of episode it is. For every episode, I have a rough idea of what I'm going to say before I even start. I have a running list of episode ideas that I write down when I come across them. And when I write an idea down, I have a kernel of an idea of the story that I want to tell. The smaller the story, the easier it tends to be to write an episode. For example, if an episode is about a single person or a single event, it's much easier to write. Episodes that have a larger focus are more difficult to write because I have to condense an enormous amount of information into a small amount of time. In some episodes, I'm trying to condense a subject that could be someone's lifetime work down to about 10 minutes, and that means making decisions about what to put in the episode and what to keep out. With that being said, I'd say the average amount of time it takes to write and record an episode is 4 to 6 hours. Sometimes it takes less, and sometimes it takes more. I will often select an episode based on how easy it is to write and how much time it will take. I have several episode ideas that have been staring at me for, in some cases, years. I really want to do them, but they're just daunting in how difficult it would be to write. The next question comes from Matt Bittner. He asks, on your website, there's a picture of you wearing a racing suit that says Best Lap F1 Event. Where did this take place? Did you meet any current or former drivers? That took place during the 2011 Grand Prix of Europe, which took place in Valencia, Spain. I was there with a group of travel journalists who were invited to the race by the Valencia Tourism Board. As part of the event, we got to visit behind-the-scenes parts of the race, including going to the paddocks where the cars were being worked on. As part of the event surrounding the Formula One race, there was a company which set up at a local racetrack that provided a Formula One experience. They owned an actual Formula One car that had actually won a Formula One race several years earlier. The company acquired the car and put a custom body on the chassis. The new fiberglass body had seats for 2 passengers between the wheels. So the companies would offer passengers a ride in an actual Formula One car with a professional driver. And I believe our driver raced on the Formula 2 circuit. We did 3 laps around the track, and it was really an incredible experience. What I learned in a very visceral way is that the key to Formula One cars isn't their top speeds, but rather their acceleration. We hit about 180 miles per hour on the straightway, but it's possible to achieve that in some high-end luxury cars in places like the Autobahn. Where Formula One cars shine is their acceleration. The acceleration I experienced riding as a passenger in a Formula One car was second only to the acceleration I experienced getting launched from an aircraft carrier. That, however, is another story. The next question comes from Sharon Nelson Dubois. She asks, any updates on the travel program you talked about a year or so ago? That is a very good question, Sharon. My original idea was to lead an in-depth tour in Rome to visit all the things that most tourists never get to see. I had a lot of interest in the tour and worked behind the scenes to make it happen. That was quite a while ago. Since then, the number of people listening to the podcast has increased dramatically. The number of people interested in going on the tour now is vastly greater than the number of slots which would be available. Moreover, given that this is a daily show, taking extended time off from the podcast has consequences. I'm still interested in doing a tour with listeners. However, I now have to figure out how to accommodate a larger number of people. My current idea is to just do a river cruise that could accommodate more people. It would also solve several problems, including managing accommodations, and it would allow for lectures on board in the evening. Right now, I'm trying to find a river cruise company to work with, and when I have more information, I will provide it. The next question comes from Jeroen de Boer in the Netherlands. He asks, hey Gary, when I talk to my friends and colleagues about your daily podcast, I always mention 1 or 2 that I find great. The Colosseum and Why the Sky is Blue. I was wondering, do you have a favorite episode that you recommend to others to get them to listen to your podcast? Greetings from the Jacuzzi and the Completionist Club. Well, Jeroen, I do not have an episode that I refer people to. When I ask listeners what their favorite episode is, the answers I get are all over the place. I don't even know if I've had 2 people mention the same episode as their favorite before. When I tell people about the podcast, I usually just tell them to pick any episode they think looks interesting and start from there. Either they will get it immediately, or this podcast just isn't for them. Sarah Fredman Ader asks, what's your favorite Taylor Swift song? Oh, that's easy. That would be the one about her ex-boyfriend. You know the one song about her ex-boyfriend. I believe she only wrote 1 song about it, and so that is the song that I'm talking about. Matthew Lehman asks, you made a comment a while ago about a WrestleMania event that was so interesting you rewatch it every year. Can you explain why, as someone who has never watched wrestling before, insight as to why it is appealing or special? It would be nice. Okay, Matthew, I'm going to tell you the story of one of the most famous professional wrestling matches in history. The Undertaker vs. Mankind Hell in a Cell match at the 1998 King of the Ring show. This single match has been the subject of documentaries, has its own Wikipedia page, and 25 years later is still the number 1 question that these wrestlers get. The Undertaker, aka Mark Calloway, and Mankind, aka Mick Foley, were scheduled to have a Hell in a Cell match at the King of the Ring show. A Hell in a Cell match is just like a steel cage, except that there's a roof on top. The entire structure is made out of chain link fencing, and this was to be the 2nd or 3rd Hell in a Cell match in history. In planning the event, Foley was talking with Hall of Famer Terry Funk about how they could top the previous Hell in a Cell match. Funk suggested that they fight on top of the cage, and maybe then The Undertaker could throw Foley off of the cage onto the announcer's table. This was an unprecedented suggestion. The top of the cell was 16 feet off the ground. When proposed with the idea, The Undertaker was concerned that this could literally kill Mick Foley. While professional wrestling matches are scripted and the outcomes predetermined, all of the action in the ring is real. Being thrown 16 feet off of a structure can't be faked. They lied to WWE officials about what they were going to do, and the announcers weren't aware of it. When the match started, they climbed to the top and sluggishly hit each other for a while. It turns out that chain link fencing wasn't designed to support people walking on it, especially 2 guys who were both 300 pounds. In fact, they both almost fell through. They eventually got to the edge, and then they performed the spot where Undertaker threw Mankind off of the cage and he crashed through the announcer's table. Everyone in the arena was shocked. The announcers were shocked. No one had ever seen anything like this. A stretcher was brought out, which was not an act. He was put on the stretcher to be taken out to an ambulance. Now, if that was the only thing that had happened, it would still have been one of the most memorable moments in wrestling history. However, Mick Foley then wakes up on the stretcher, gets up, and climbs back to the top of the cell. Everything at this point becomes unplanned. They keep fighting on the top of the cage, and then the Undertaker does a choke slam on Foley onto the top of the steel cage. Normally, this is a very safe move on a wrestling mat. However, as I mentioned, the top of the steel cage wasn't designed to support the weight of people walking on it, and certainly not a 300-pound man landing on it. Foley broke through the top of the cage and fell onto the ring below. And on top of the fall, a folded steel chair that they were using fell down with him and hit him in the face. Once again, staff and medical officials went into the ring. Foley refused to be sent out on a stretcher twice in one match, so he was assisted out of the ring walking. On camera, you can see something in his nose that looked kind of like a booger. It turned out it was his tooth that was sticking out of his nose. And this still wasn't the end of the match. Foley goes back in to continue fighting, and the final spot of the match was Foley spreading thumbtacks on the mat, real thumbtacks, and getting his back slammed into it once again by The Undertaker. At that point, the match ended, and everyone was in disbelief as to what they just saw. There had never been anything like it before, and there will never be anything like it again, as there is no way something so dangerous would ever be allowed. It technically wasn't a good wrestling match, but it is one of the most famous ones in history. Graham McIntosh asks, have you ever been to Scotland? If so, where? Have you ever had haggis, iron brew, deep-fried Mars bar? Well, Graham, I have been to Scotland. I've been to Glasgow and Edinburgh, and I have visited the World Heritage Site at New Lanark. However, I've never been further north. I have had haggis, and I didn't really see what the fuss was about. Haggis and neeps really isn't that much different than shepherd's pie. I haven't had iron brew or a deep-fried Mars bar, but I also have to say that deep-fried candy bars I don't think are uniquely Scottish. I've actually seen them all over the world. I'd like to visit Scotland again and visit the Highlands and possibly the Hebrides, Shetland, and Orkney Islands as well. Jerry Gardner asks, hey Gary, I understand through the podcast that you're a big Green Bay Packers fan. I live in Kansas City and we just hosted the NFL draft here and there was a huge Chiefs fans turnout. Through your world travels, who do you think is the most enthusiastic and passionate fan base for a local team? I'm guessing football/soccer is the world's most popular sport. What do you think are the second and third most popular sports in the world? Enthusiastic fans can be found all over the world, and I'm not sure there's any one team or sport which has an edge over any other. In terms of the popularity of team sports, after football/soccer, it would probably be cricket, basketball, baseball, or rugby, depending on how you want to define popularity. The biggest sports league in the world in terms of revenue is actually the NFL, but interest in American football drops off dramatically once you get outside the United States and Canada. There has been talk of creating an NFL franchise in London. American football is about as popular in the UK as the English Premier League is in the United States. However, when taken over the entire population, the numbers might be enough to support a team. Glenn Folau from New Zealand asks, why your disdain for the Chicago Bears? Is it because they, like the Green Bay Packers, are from the northern states and you share a regional rivalry? Or are they just, as you say, truly horrible? Cheers. Well, Glenn, the Chicago Bears and the Green Bay Packers are the two oldest NFL franchises. They have the longest rivalry in American football, and they have played the most games between each other. The Packers have the most championships in NFL history with 13, and the Bears are second with 8. Since their first meeting in 1921, the all-time series has the Packers up 105-95 with 6 ties. On top of that, there are social and geographic aspects to the rivalry. Chicago is one of the largest cities in the United States. Green Bay is the smallest city with a professional sports team. People from Illinois are always driving north into Wisconsin for vacation, and they've developed a reputation for driving extremely fast and kind of being obnoxious. Moreover, the two teams tend to be good when the other is bad. The Bears were last good in the 1980s when the Packers were horrible. However, over the last 30 years, the Packers have been pretty good, and the Bears, for the most part, have been bad. They did have one Super Bowl appearance where they lost, but that's about it. So that wraps up this Q&A episode. If I didn't get to your question, please feel free to submit it again next month. And if you would like to ask a question, just join the Facebook group, to which you can find a link in the show notes. The executive producer of Everything Everywhere Daily is Charles Daniel. The associate producers are Thor, Thomsen, and Peter Bennett. Today's review comes from listener Saying Addict from Apple Podcasts in the Philippines. They write, amazing. Stumbled upon this podcast around the time that the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once was the buzz. I love the movie, and while I'm willing to watch it multiple times, I'm sure that there's a limit. But with Everything Everywhere Daily, there's always something new. I enjoy listening while on my drives to and from work or during my morning walks. For me, nothing beats being able to learn while accomplishing other things too. I love the format and style, as I feel that even the most complex topics can be made clear and understandable. I'm nowhere near being a completionist, but I look forward to joining that exclusive club in time. Keep it up. Salamat, Saying Addict, you have officially unlocked the Philippines badge. I'm glad that some people have found this show because of the movie. I have a difficult time explaining to everyone that I was actually using this name since 2006. Well before the movie came out or the British mobile phone company that launched in 2010. Remember, if you leave a review or send me a boostagram, you too can have it read on the show. And also remember, you can now leave reviews on individual episodes on Spotify.